"Doctor, what if she's just setting a trap?" the head nurse whispered as Dr. Theo knelt to the floor of the charity ward, cradling a weak and feverish child in his arms. "Isn't that the same woman, the patient who spread those rumors before?" "Please," the woman begged, holding the child closer. "Save my son. I'm begging you." The nurses exchanged wary glances. Another muttered under her breath, "She's probably just after money, being married, Doc." Dr. Theo Carlson said nothing. He simply stared at the boy. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped forward. He looked into the child's face and then back to himself, back to a past he had tried to bury. "Clear the floor. Prep the OR," he said quietly but firmly. "I'll do the surgery." No one moved. I need to know the truth. Several years earlier, a memory. The sun blazed hot over St. Albert Memorial Hospital. It was Theo Carlson's first week as a surgical intern. Tall, serious, and always looking down at his clipboard, Theo was all business. During his surgical rounds, he was assigned a minor appendectomy patient, a young woman named Andrea Andy Dillon. "Doc, here's the patient in bed 7, the nurse said, handing over the chart. Theo looked up, and it was as if time froze. Andy lay on the hospital bed, pale but somehow radiant. There was a sparkle in her eyes that made the heat and exhaustion of the hospital fade. She wasn't stunning in a movie star way, but she had a presence you couldn't ignore. When she smiled at Theo, something stirred deep in the young doctor's chest. "Good afternoon, Doc," Andy greeted him with a teasing grin. "Hope you're not like the last doctor. He looked more scared than I was about the surgery." Theo chuckled. "I promise, I'm not the scared type, especially not when the patient's smile is already half the cure." That was how it all started, their daily exchange of jokes and stories. Every time Theo checked on Andy's wound, the conversations went beyond medical talk. They shared stories about favorite foods, their hometown hangouts, and Andy's dream of becoming a preschool teacher. "I want to teach kids just as rowdy as I was," she said one day. "You good with kids?" Theo asked, curious. "Not just kids," Andy shot back with a sly smile. "Even with doctors, sometimes." Theo's heart raced, but he knew it wasn't right. There were rules, boundaries. Still, each time Andy laughed or shared a story from her simple life, Theo felt his defenses crumbling. On the night before Andy's discharge, she held up her discharge papers and asked, "Doc, can we go up to the rooftop? I just want to see the city lights one last time." Theo hesitated, then nodded. Together they climbed to the rooftop. The cold December air swirled around them. Below, the city flickered with car lights. Above, the stars winked in the sky. "Andy," Theo said softly, "I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I do. I've grown close to you." Andy turned her back, not to reject him, but to hide the shy smile creeping onto her face. "You're not alone," she replied, "but you're right. We shouldn't." Silence. Only the wind spoke. Then Theo stepped forward and gently took her hand. "What if tonight is all we have?" he asked. Andy didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned in. Their lips met in a kiss that sealed the feelings they had buried beneath their uniforms, their fears, their obligations. They didn't think of the rules. They didn't think of tomorrow. When Theo returned to his quarters that night, he couldn't stop smiling. He held in his hand a torn strip of paper with a number Andy had written. "If we don't meet again," she had written, "know that you made me happy, even just for one night." The next morning, Theo woke up smiling, but when he returned to the ward, Andy was gone. "Where's Miss Dillon?" he asked the nurse at the station. "She was discharged early this morning," the nurse replied, uncertain. "She didn't say goodbye to the attending." "She had clearance from last night, but she left without notice. No note, no call." Theo's chest tightened. It felt like the air had been punched from his lungs. He rushed to the duty room, fumbled for his phone. No texts, no missed calls. He dialed the number Andy gave him. This number cannot be reached. Again. Still nothing. He stared at the paper in his hand, her handwriting faintly smudged now. If we don't meet again, know that you made me happy. Suddenly, the door flew open. Theo! It was Dr. Arthur Carlson, the hospital chairman, and Theo's father. Dressed in all black, his smile was cold and unreadable behind his glasses. A man used to power, unmoved by sentiment. You wanted to talk to me? Arthur asked, stepping forward. Theo met his gaze. It's about Miss Dillon. She left without saying anything. His father shrugged. Some patients do that. They don't care what the doctor says, especially when the doctor's young. She's not like that, Theo insisted. She wouldn't just leave. There's a reason. Dr. Carlson's face tightened slightly. Don't trouble yourself. Her leaving might be the best thing, for you and for our reputation. Theo blinked. Reputation? You're on track to become head of surgery before you're 30. You can't afford scandal. Is it scandalous to fall in love with a patient? Theo asked bitterly. His father didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in and said, with icy calm, Choose, son. Your life, or your profession, you can't have both. He turned and walked out, as if the conversation never happened. What Theo didn't know was that on the other side of the hospital, just the day before, the real confrontation had already occurred. Dr. Arthur Carlson had met with Andy. One day before Andy left the hospital, she sat quietly in a private conference room across from Dr. Arthur Carlson. She wore a simple white blouse and carried a small bag. Her posture was straight, her face composed, but the tension was obvious. Arthur stood, hands behind his back, like a judge about to pass sentence. Miss Dillon, he began, I heard about the closeness between you and my son. Andy didn't speak. She couldn't meet his eyes. She was ashamed, afraid, and secretly carrying something no one else knew. I'll be direct, Arthur continued. If you truly care about my son, leave. I don't want to see his name in the papers, especially not next to the word scandal. Andy opened her mouth, voice trembling. But if you really respect him, if you have any dignity left, Arthur cut in, you'll walk away. Don't ruin his future. Andy began to cry, though she tried to hold it back. She didn't respond. She stood, bowed slightly as a sign of respect, and left. Back in the present, Theo spent the entire day restless, barely able to function. By evening, he sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, a spoon untouched in his hand. There was so much I didn't get to say, so many questions. Meanwhile, across town at an old bus terminal, Andy sat in silence, holding her stomach as tears fell. You okay, Andy? Her travel companion asked. She nodded weakly, but inside she was broken. She couldn't tell the father of her unborn child the truth. She had chosen silence because the weight of his father's warning was heavier than the sweetness of what they shared that rooftop night. She knew he didn't understand, and wouldn't, at least not yet. Days passed. Theo remained uneasy. Each day he'd check the ward, hoping she might return. Maybe she left something behind. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she'd come back. But with every shift, every empty bed, she was still gone. Theo began to change. The once lively, focused intern became quiet, distant, distracted. His colleagues noticed. Hey man, you okay? Asked his co-intern Lewis. I'm fine. Theo forced a smile, but his eyes held the weight of unanswered questions. He became obsessed with finding Andy. He called in favors, searched hospital records, asked around admissions. But there was no clear address, no active contact. Her phone was disconnected. The emergency contact didn't respond. Even her Facebook account, gone, deleted. One thing was clear, Andy had disappeared, and she meant it. In a quiet, rural town, Andy had taken refuge with her Aunt Melinda. The old woman was cheerful, but poor. It was there that Andy hid, far from prying eyes, and from the man she couldn't tell about her pregnancy. "Aunt Mel, are we safe here?" Andy asked once as they sat on the porch of a tiny wooden house. "Of course, honey," her aunt replied. "You're safe here. That's what matters. No one knows us here, and maybe that's better." Andy looked up at the sky, rubbing her belly. It barely showed, but she knew something was growing inside her, the result of one unforgettable night. Sometimes, at night, she'd close her eyes and wonder, what if I had stayed? What if I had fought for our love? What if I had told him the truth? But she always remembered the cold voice of Arthur Carlson. "You'll ruin his future." And that fear silenced her again and again. Meanwhile, Theo could wait no longer. He hired a private investigator. They searched for leads. The only possible trace was a woman matching Andy's description, seen boarding a bus eastbound. But the trail ended there. "I should just forget her," Theo muttered to himself one evening, standing outside the hospital. But he couldn't. Every woman who passed, every stranger who laughed, he kept searching for Andy's smile, and in his heart it meant only one thing. She lied to me. She played me. Maybe she got close to me on purpose, he told Lewis one day at the bar. Maybe she had another motive, and once she got what she wanted, she left. But what if she didn't? Lewis asked. Theo had no answer. He couldn't admit the truth, that despite every reason to be angry, one question still haunted him. Where is she? One night, Andy sat on her bed, quietly crying as she held a small ultrasound photo, the first image of the child in her womb. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "If I can't give you a full family, I'll give you enough love for two." From that night on, she promised herself to rise, not as Theo's woman, but as a mother. She found a job at a small daycare center. She was hired as an assistant teacher. The pay was low, but enough, for milk, vitamins, and prenatal care. Months passed. Andy gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Liam Elijah, a boy who cried for the first time under a rainstorm. Elijah, she repeated softly, means, "My God is Yahweh." To her, it was a reminder that even through suffering, heaven had a plan. When she saw her son's face, she whispered, "You look just like your father." Emotion trembled in her voice. "But he doesn't need to know. He doesn't have to be hurt, not if he's not looking for us." Back at the hospital, Theo was promoted to junior attending surgeon. He accepted the title in silence, but inside, a part of him still felt missing. Every time he looked at the rooftop, the place of their final night together, the wind seemed to whisper, "Your story isn't over yet." But Theo was starting to give up. He was tired of hurting, tired of hoping. He didn't know that somewhere far away, a little boy who looked just like him was now running through the dirt roads of a village. And with each step, the truth was running closer too. It was a scorching day at St. Grace Community Hospital, a small, underfunded facility where patients often had to share beds. Yet, despite its shortcomings, it remained the last refuge for mothers, the elderly, and children, still hoping the system had mercy. Outside the emergency entrance, a woman soaked in sweat carried a child who was barely conscious. Andy Matthews wasn't the bright-faced girl she once was. She was pale, barely able to speak, trembling with exhaustion and worry. "Please," she begged the guard at the entrance. "My son has a hole in his heart. He needs oxygen, just a checkup at least." "Ma'am," the guard replied, glancing apologetically. "The ER is full. You'll have to go to the charity ward." Andy rushed toward the charity ward, still cradling Liam, who was now visibly weaker. His eyes were puffy, his body dripping with sweat, and his breathing shallow. Inside, every hand was occupied. Some patients had fevers, others were injured. Many lay on mats on the floor. "Please," Andy cried out, "help my son." Nurse Lorraine, the head nurse, looked at her, sizing her up from head to toe. "No more beds, ma'am. Do you have a referral?" "I don't. We don't have a doctor. I'll wait, even on the floor. He just needs oxygen." Another nurse noticed Andy's worn-out thrift store shoes with holes at the sides. Her blouse was faded, patched by hand. One of them whispered, "Isn't that the woman from the old scandal? The one who had that issue with a doctor?" Andy remained silent, head down, begging again. "We'll stay on the floor. I'll watch over him myself. Please don't abandon my son." "There's no slot in the charity ward," Lorraine responded coldly. "Try another hospital. Maybe they're not full." Before she could leave, Andy collapsed to the floor, hugging Liam tightly. "Baby, don't leave me," she sobbed. "I don't know where else to go." A janitor, watching the scene unfold, stepped closer, unable to turn away. "Ma'am, wait. I'll call Doctor, Carlson's assistant. Maybe he can check on your son." At the far end of the hospital, in the outpatient clinics, Nurse Mark, Dr. Theo Carlson's assistant, was busy recording files when someone knocked. "Sir, there's a woman in the charity ward. Her child looks critical. No money. Maybe you can assess them?" Mark stood immediately. When he arrived at the ward, he found Andy sitting on the floor, clinging to the child. He crouched beside them. "Ma'am, I'm Mark. May I take a look at your son?" Andy lifted her head. Their eyes met for the first time. Mark stared at the child. Long lashes, sharp nose, a chin that seemed familiar. "What's your name?" he asked. "Andy Matthews, and this is Liam." Mark nodded. "I'll get the doctor. Please stay right here." He hurried back to the clinic, pulled out his phone, and scrolled to an old photo of Dr. Theo. His mind compared the child's face to Theo's graduation picture. The eyes, the brows, the shape of the face. "I can't be wrong," he whispered. "That boy looks just like him." Meanwhile, Theo had just returned from a patient referral. As he entered the clinic, Mark blocked his path. "Doc, there's a boy in the charity ward, critical condition." "Is there an attending?" "No, sir, but—" Mark hesitated. "There's a woman with him. I think you know her." Theo didn't wait. He rushed to the charity ward, and there she was, a thin, pale woman. No matter how many years had passed, he knew that face. Andy. He froze. She looked up. They stared at each other like ghosts, reuniting after years of silence. "Doc," Andy whispered. Theo couldn't speak. The background noise, the patients, the machines, it all faded. The only thing that mattered was the sick child and the woman he once loved with all his heart. He turned to the boy, pale, struggling to breathe, cold sweat on his forehead, a heart murmur. Theo stepped closer. For the first time, he looked directly into the child's face, and something deep within him stirred, bursting forth from where he had buried it all these years. He knelt beside Liam. Andy stood at the side, her hands shaking, unable to make eye contact. In 5 years, she had never imagined they'd meet again like this. "What's his name?" Theo asked, eyes still on the boy. "Liam," she said quietly. Even the name triggered something in Theo. He didn't know whether it was the sound or the familiarity, but it struck deep. "Let me examine him," Theo said seriously. He knelt beside Liam and gently checked his lungs, pulse, and heartbeat. The child was limp, barely speaking. As soon as he placed the stethoscope on his chest, he heard it, irregular rhythms, a murmur, a hole in the heart. Theo stared at the boy's face, Long lashes, sharp nose, lips, the eyes that looked exactly like his own as a child. From the side of the room, Nurse Mark peeked in, holding up his tablet, displaying Theo's old graduation photo. When he looked at Liam, he couldn't help but move closer. "Doc," he said, showing the screen, "look at this. Doesn't he look like you when you were a kid?" Theo turned. The moment his eyes landed on the photo, he froze. He didn't need tests, didn't need gossip, didn't need clues. In a second, it all exploded. The unanswered questions, the pain from Andy's disappearance, the emptiness that haunted him for 5 years. He turned to her. "How long?" he asked, voice sharp and low. Andy couldn't reply. 5 years old? Theo pressed, fire now creeping into his voice. "You disappeared for 5 years and came back with a child?" Before Andy could answer, Liam suddenly convulsed. "Doc, he's struggling to breathe," shouted the nurse. "Bring oxygen. Clear the OR." Theo barked. "There's no room in the charity OR," Nurse Lorraine replied. "All the ORs are booked, and he's not a priority case." "He's my priority," Theo said. He stood and scanned the room. "Clear the whole floor," he ordered. "Prepare the operating room." Everyone stood frozen. Some nurses couldn't even move. "Doc, are you sure?" "Close the entire floor. I'm doing the surgery." Silence fell across the ward. It was one sentence, but it hit like a bomb. Andy stood in the corner, nearly in tears. "Theo, we can't pay. I don't have—" He cut her off. "That doesn't matter. What matters is saving his life." He turned to Mark. "Prep the OR. Inform admin. I don't care if they complain." Mark nodded and ran off. Theo knelt beside the boy again, holding his cold little hand. "Liam," he whispered, "you're not going anywhere." But in the back of his mind, one question refused to fade. "Are you my son?" As Liam was wheeled toward the emergency operating room, Andy followed behind, trembling with fear and emotion. She couldn't speak. She didn't know what to say first, whether to thank Theo, to confess the truth, or to protect him from a pain that might return if he ever found out everything. In the hallway, Nurse Lorraine pulled Andy aside. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "Saving the kid's life is one thing, but it might destroy Doc's career." Andy looked at her son. "The child is what matters. If something has to break, shouldn't we choose to save a life over protecting pride?" Inside the operating room, everything was ready. Theo stood, focused, though the weight in his chest was heavy. This wasn't just a procedure. This was a battle he never imagined facing. Not only one of medical precision, but of the heart, of a past he had long buried, but was now forced to confront. As the anesthesia took effect, and Liam's eyes slowly closed, a soft whisper escaped his lips. "Doc, I feel like I know you." It hit Theo like a thunderclap, but he had to stay strong, not just as a doctor, but as a man who now needed to face the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how late. Silence enveloped the OR, broken only by the beeping monitors and the rustle of sterile tools. Dr. Theo Carlson's hands were steady as he began the procedure on Liam. Yet beneath his surgical mask, emotion surged through him. With every incision and suture, he tried to silence a feeling he couldn't name. Anger, shock, sorrow, fear. But above all, one burning question swallowed his every thought. Is he really my son? There had been no clear answer from Andy. She hadn't spoken to him since the surgery began. But every passing moment as he fought to save the child, the connection between them only deepened, something invisible but undeniable. Outside the OR window, Andy stood watching quietly. In her hands, she clutched a small rosary, the first gift she had given Liam when he was born. When she saw Theo wielding the scalpel himself, rather than passing the responsibility to another surgeon, she broke into tears. You haven't changed, Theo, she whispered. You've always been the one to step up. She knew he had questions. She knew he wouldn't rest until he got the truth, especially now, when the truth was right in front of him. 2 hours later, Theo exited the operating room. He was tired, but success shone in his eyes. He wiped his sweat and went straight to the lounge, where Andy sat quietly. She stood immediately. "How is he?" she asked in a faint voice, anxiety written across her face. "He's stable," Theo replied. "The hole in his heart was repaired. He'll need to stay in the ICU for a few days, but he's safe." Andy clutched her chest and sat down, tears rolling as she smiled faintly. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Silence. A deep, heavy breath followed. "Why didn't you tell me?" Theo asked directly. "Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you find me?" Andy looked down at the floor, eyes squeezed shut. "You don't know everything, Theo." "Then tell me," he said. His voice was calm, but wounded. "I waited. I searched. For 5 years I kept wondering, did you just play me?" Andy didn't speak. "You show up now, with a child who looks exactly like me," Theo continued. "Just answer me. Is he my son?" Andy flinched. She took a deep breath, ready to speak the lie she had rehearsed countless times in her mind. "My mom got sick," she began. "I had to leave suddenly. Everything moved so fast. I had no way to contact the hospital, no signal. I didn't want to ruin your life." Theo stared at her. "That's not an answer." Andy shook her head. "He's not your son, Theo." Silence. It was like a punch to the chest. "I'm not?" he echoed. "You don't need to feel responsible. I didn't want to ruin your career. You're happy now, aren't you? You have nothing to worry about." "Happy?" Theo scoffed bitterly. "For 5 years I've done nothing but look for you. You left me, no explanation. Now you show up with a boy who looks just like me, and you won't even say if it's true or not. And if I told you he was yours, then what?" Andy snapped, voice trembling. "You'd chain yourself to a responsibility you didn't plan for?" "That's not your decision," Theo said, hurt but firm. "I deserve to know. Not just as a man or a doctor, but as a human being. Andy, is Liam my son?" Andy met his gaze, but inside she wasn't ready to confess. What if Theo walked away again? What if he couldn't accept it? So she chose the lie again. He's not yours. Behind the door, Nurse Mark was listening quietly, and from what he heard, he didn't believe a word of it. Not after seeing Theo's face in the OR, not after seeing how much he cared, not after seeing the child's eyes that looked like Theo's soul. The next day, Liam was recovering in the ICU. Theo stood quietly at the window, watching. When Liam spotted him, he grinned wide. "Doc Theo, it's you again." Theo smiled, even with a heavy heart. He tapped the glass. "You'll be okay, buddy. I promise." Andy stood quietly in the corner, unable to meet Theo's eyes. But in her heart she knew the truth was creeping closer each day, and it wouldn't stay hidden much longer. 2 days after the operation, Liam was lively again in the ICU. Though his body was still recovering, his energy returned every time Dr. Theo visited. "Doc," Liam greeted him cheerfully, trying to sit up in bed. "Did you bring me a toy?" Theo smiled and pulled a small box from behind his white coat. "Special delivery for my coolest patient." Liam eagerly opened the box. It was a toy stethoscope set. His eyes lit up. "Can I be a doctor too?" he asked excitedly. "If you want to," Theo said, kneeling beside the bed. "You might even be better than me one day." From across the room, Andy watched silently. She knelt by the door, watching the two of them interact. In every smile Liam gave, and every soft chuckle from Theo, she saw a connection she could no longer deny. Liam was his, but instead of warmth, she felt fear. The closer Theo got to her son, the closer they came to discovering the truth she still kept hidden. "Mommy, look, I've got a stethoscope," Liam called out proudly. Andy walked over, kissed his forehead and smiled. "You're such a handsome doctor." "Can I practice on Doc Theo?" he asked. Theo laughed. "Go ahead, but I'll be the patient this time, okay?" Liam put the toy earpieces on and pressed the plastic chest piece against Theo's chest. I think I hear something, like a big thumping heart." Their eyes met, Theo and Andy's, just for a second. But it was sharp. Theo's eyes seemed to ask, "Why does my heart beat like this when I'm near him?" When Theo left the ICU, that question lingered. Why do I feel so drawn to this child? It's not just sympathy, it's deeper, stronger, real. Liam's hand, his eyes, the way he laughed, everything about him pulled at Theo's instincts. In his office, he found Nurse Mark flipping through charts. Mark looked like he wanted to ask something, but hesitated. "Doc," he finally said, "have you noticed how close you are to Liam?" Theo paused. "Why?" "Nothing, just even the interns noticed. They say he looks like you, the way he moves, his smile." Theo let out a forced laugh. "Just a coincidence, probably." But when he was alone again, he couldn't shake the thought. Not just a coincidence, not just resemblance. There was something else. He pulled out his phone and looked at the picture Mark had taken of Liam. Then he compared it to a childhood photo of himself at 6 years old. The resemblance was uncanny. That evening, Theo brought some items to Liam in the ICU, a new blanket, coloring books, and vitamins. He was surprised to find Liam already asleep, and Andy sitting silently at his bedside. She stared into nothingness. Theo approached quietly. "Andy," he said gently. She turned, startled, and immediately stood. "Sorry, I shouldn't be here like this." Theo shook his head. "You're not doing anything wrong. This isn't just doctor and patient anymore. I know you." He sat by Liam's bed. "He's cheerful," Theo said, watching the boy sleep. "But when he's alone, he's quiet. It's like he's looking for something." Andy didn't respond. "You know," Theo continued, "in just a week, he's given me more joy than I've had in years. It's like I've known him forever." The air shifted. The silence thickened. Only Liam's heart monitor beeped gently in the background. Theo turned to Andy. "Even if you don't say it, I can feel it." Andy froze. "Feel what?" she asked. Theo hesitated. "That there's a part of me in him. I don't know how much, but I can't deny it. When I see him, I see myself, and every time he laughs, I'm afraid to lose that." Andy started crying silently. She turned away, trying to hide her tears. "You don't have to lie anymore," Theo added, "but please, don't keep me out of the world he's living in." The atmosphere in the ward was quiet when she walked in. There was Theo, sitting beside a young boy, smiling and chatting with him. Andy was a few feet away, silently updating the medication logbook. "Baby," Bianca whispered dramatically as she approached. Surprise. Theo turned and froze. He stood up. "Bianca, what are you doing here?" "I've been looking for you in the city. You never answered, so here I am, in the middle of nowhere." She tapped his arm with mock annoyance. Theo rubbed the back of his neck. Before he could explain, Bianca glanced at the boy. "And who's this?" Liam beamed. "I'm Liam." Bianca looked him up and down. "So you're the one they say is Theo's favorite patient." "Yes, he said I can be a doctor when I grow up." "Is that so?" Bianca smiled tightly. "Are you his only patient, or is there something special between you two?" Theo and Andy exchanged glances. Bianca saw it, the tension. "Excuse me," Theo said quickly, leading Bianca out to the hallway. Once away from the others, Bianca rounded on him. "Who is she?" "That's Andy, Liam's mother. She's a patient." "A mother?" Bianca scoffed. "From the charity ward, and I can see you're pretty close with the kid." "He's just a child, Bianca. There's nothing wrong with caring." "Nothing?" Bianca raised her voice. Admin says you're the only one keeping that boy alive in the ICU. And the mother, she's silent but clearly close to you too. Bianca, please, Theo said wearily. Don't judge people you don't know. I don't need to know them, Theo. I know you, and you're not like this with just anyone. Theo had no response. Even he didn't fully understand what was happening. But what he did know was that something inside his heart was slowly being opened by a boy and a woman he thought he'd lost forever. Later that afternoon, while Andy sat by Liam's bed, Bianca returned quietly to the ward. She wore black sunglasses and carried a bag of expensive fruit. Hi, she said coldly. I'm Bianca, Dr. Theo's fiancée. Andy looked up, startled. I'm Andy, Liam's mum. Nice to meet you. Bianca forced a smile. Your son is cute. Thank you, Andy replied softly. Bianca stepped closer to Liam. Hello, sweetheart. I'm going to marry Dr. Theo. Do you know what a wife is? Yes, Liam answered innocently. It means someone you love. Bianca chuckled lightly, but her eyes gleamed with something else. Well, not every child gets to be part of someone else's life. Some families are already complete, and when others try to join, it just causes trouble. Liam didn't understand. He just looked confused. Bianca stood, leaned closer, and whispered sharply into his ear. You're not the child here. Stop clinging to my fiancé. Liam's face went blank. Tears welled up in his eyes. At that moment, the door burst open. Andy! Theo called out as he entered. What's going on? Andy rushed to Liam, who was now quietly crying. Baby, what happened? Why are you crying? Liam didn't answer. He just held onto her tightly. Theo stared at the scene. Bianca, what did you do? I didn't do anything, she replied. I just told him where his place is. Theo's face darkened. Whether he's my son or not, you have no right to yell at a child. Oh, really? Bianca sneered. So you're choosing a woman from a charity ward over me, one who left you 5 years ago. Theo's eyes narrowed. Who told you she left me? I don't care, Bianca snapped, but if you want to throw everything away for some woman with a child whose father you don't even know, fine. She turned to Andy, looked her up and down. Good luck putting up with a man who can't keep his promises. Bianca stormed out of the ward, seething. Theo stood in silence, then turned to Andy. I'm sorry. I didn't think she'd do something like that. Andy shook her head, brushing tears from Liam's face. You don't have to apologize, Theo. We're used to being unwelcome in worlds that were never made for us. And in that quiet moment, something began to unfold in Theo's heart. What if this world was meant for them too? The charity ward fell silent after the outburst. Liam remained clinging to Andy, his face still wet with tears. He barely moved, as if trying to make sense of the cruel words hurled at him by the woman who had just left. Theo stood at the foot of the bed, watching the boy's every tear, and with each drop, a flame ignited deeper inside him. This wasn't just a patient, and Liam wasn't just another child. This was the boy who had made him cry the moment they first met, the boy whose every gesture mirrored a memory Theo thought he'd long buried. He noticed a scrape on Liam's hand, a cut from when he had slipped earlier, trying to hide after Bianca yelled at him. Theo approached Andy and spoke gently. Can I borrow some alcohol and cotton? Andy opened her worn bag and pulled out a small pouch, its zipper broken. She didn't know what Theo planned to do, but she handed him the item silently. Theo gently cleaned Liam's scrape. Does it hurt? He asked. Liam shook his head. No, he whispered, but the pain in his eyes said otherwise, not from the cut, but from the words left behind. As Theo tended to the wound, he couldn't hold back his thoughts. Whether he's my son or not, Theo said, she had no right to hurt him, No right to insult a child. Andy looked at Theo, sensing the depth of his frustration. He continued, his voice lower but firm. No child deserves to be spoken to that way. No mother deserves to be belittled in front of her child. Not here, not anywhere. I'm sorry, Doc, Andy said, her voice trembling. I didn't expect. Theo stopped her. Don't apologize. It's not your fault. You don't have to bow down to people who don't know how to show respect. He stood up and pulled out his phone. Christine, he said to his secretary in the city, call off the engagement announcement. Cancel Friday's gala. I have other priorities. Sir, came the stunned voice on the line. Just do it, Theo said firmly, and ended the call. He turned back to Andy. Her face had softened, but a trace of fear lingered. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. I already did, he replied, and I wouldn't have done it if I didn't have a reason. He looked at Liam, who was staring back and still stunned by everything he'd heard. You know, buddy, Theo said softly, sometimes we have to make hard decisions, because staying silent while someone's being hurt hurts even more. Liam didn't say a word, but a smile slowly crept onto his face. The next day, news spread throughout the hospital. Dr. Theo Carlson had called off his engagement to socialite Bianca Stanton. Some were shocked, many whispered, but everyone had the same question. Was it because of the woman from the charity ward? In the staff pantry, Nurse Lorraine overheard a few nurses talking. Did you hear? Doc Theo yelled at Miss Bianca over that little boy. Or maybe it wasn't just about the boy, one added. Lorraine didn't respond, but deep inside, she knew Theo had his reasons, and now she respected him more, not because of his name, but because he stood up for those with no voice. Back in the charity ward, Andy quietly served porridge to Liam. Mom, Liam asked, is Dr. Theo mad at us? Andy shook her head. No, baby, he's not mad. Then why was he yelling at the lady yesterday? Liam asked. Andy sighed, unsure how to explain. Sometimes, sweetheart, we need to be defended, even if we didn't ask for it. Liam looked around the ward and smiled faintly. It's okay even if I don't have a real dad, he said, because I have a brave mom and a kind doctor who protects me. Andy couldn't speak. She pulled her son into her arms and whispered, If only you knew, my love. If only you knew. In his office, Theo stared at an old photo of him and his father. On the back, the words were handwritten. Your name carries weight. Don't waste it. For the first time, he felt the full meaning of those words. It wasn't just about his reputation, it was about standing for people who others thought didn't belong. He stood up, resolved, not just to be a doctor, but to be something more. Not for a name, but for a boy who might be his son, and for the woman who had hidden the truth for years. 2 days after the incident with Bianca, peace began to return to the charity ward. Liam had become more energetic, his laughter growing louder, and every day he eagerly looked for Dr. Theo. Mom, does Dr. Theo have a shift today? Liam asked as he colored a picture of the three of them together. He might be in surgery today, baby, Andy replied, while rinsing a basin near the ward's back sink. Tell me when he comes, okay? I want to show him my drawing. But before she could respond, the curtain pulled back. Knock, knock, Theo's voice rang out, holding a small bag. Doc, Liam shouted. You took forever. Sorry, buddy, Theo said, chuckling. I got caught up in rounds, but I brought a peace offering. He opened the bag. It was full of toys, coloring books, a toy stethoscope set, 2 action figures, and a bag of fishball crackers, Liam's favorite, though they were cold now. Wow, Liam exclaimed. Are these all for me? Yup, Theo replied, but there's a catch. What is it? You have to let me and your mom get coffee together. Theo winked at Andy. Andy's eyes widened. Wait, what? Coffee, outside the hospital. There's a food stall nearby. Their local brew is amazing. My treat. Liam grinned. Okay, but if you're not back soon, you have to make up for it tomorrow. Hold on, Andy said, hesitant. Won't people talk? I don't want to stir gossip. Gossip? Theo smirked as he slung the bag over his shoulder. Then don't smile. Let's make them think you're mad at me. Andy shook her head, but couldn't help smiling. All right, but just a quick one. Outside the hospital, under a colourful umbrella at a local food stall, Theo and Andy sat at a plastic table. Between them were 2 mugs of coffee and a small plate of biscuits. They sat quietly at first, watching tricycles and ambulances pass by. This coffee's good, Theo said, taking a sip. Told you, no need for fancy fraps. Andy took a sip too. The kind with grounds. That's the real deal. Theo laughed. You haven't changed. Andy looked at him. You've changed. You're quieter now, more serious. Wounded, Theo replied, barely above a whisper. Andy blinked. Wounded? You disappeared for 5 years, and now suddenly you have a child, and here we are, having coffee outside a hospital. I never thought I'd see you again. Andy didn't respond right away. She slowly stirred her coffee. A lot happened, she finally said, but I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to, but I wasn't ready to lose you either. Andy looked away, trying to hide a small, pained smile. Can I make it up to you? Theo asked suddenly. What? Can I make it up to you, not for the past, but for whatever time we still have while you're here? Andy stared at him. He wasn't the intern she left years ago. He was more mature now, more refined, but the sparkle in his eyes remained, especially when he looked at Liam. There's nothing to make up for, she replied. But if you want to start again, as friends, colleagues, on duty together, that's fine. Theo nodded. Duty partners first, friends next, maybe dates later. Andy chuckled. You're still ridiculous. But inside, she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Despite all the hardship, all the secrets she still kept, it felt good to sit beside the man she once loved. And for a moment, in that simple corner of the world, no explanations were needed. When they returned to the ward, Liam ran up to them. Mum, Doc Theo, you took so long. He pulled them both toward the bed. Surprise, buddy, Theo said, handing him a candy. Reward for being brave. I'm okay even without a dad, Liam said suddenly as he held the candy, because I have a brave mom and a kind doctor. Andy didn't say anything, neither did Theo, but their eyes met, and in that look, something unspoken passed between them. No formal promises, no labels, but trust was beginning to bloom again, and in the stillness of the night, through shared glances and quiet smiles, feelings they thought were lost began to return, not loud, not demanding, but patiently waiting to be claimed. Night had fallen over Saint, Grace Hospital. The lights in the hallway were dim, and the only sound in the doctor's lounge was the ticking of the wall clock. There, on an old couch, Dr. Theo Carlson lay drenched in sweat, exhausted and feverish. He had just come off 3 back-to-back emergency cases. Across the hospital, Andy had just finished watching over Liam, who had fallen asleep after reading from the colouring book Theo gave him. But something in Andy's gut told her something wasn't right. Nurse Mark approached quietly. Ma'am, Doc Theo has a fever. He's refusing to go to the ER. He just wants to sleep it off in the lounge. Andy didn't hesitate. She grabbed Liam's old washcloth and went straight to the lounge. When she entered, she saw Theo lying there, clearly unwell. His shirt was soaked and his body trembled slightly. His eyes were closed, but it wasn't a restful sleep. She walked gently to the sink, filled a glass, wet the washcloth, and placed it on his forehead. "You're so stubborn," she whispered as she wiped his sweat. "Even with a fever, you won't get checked." The room was quiet. She didn't leave right away. She sat beside the couch and looked at him. The once young doctor she had teased years ago was now a man, worn, tired, but still fighting, and even in his condition, he kept guiding others, including her and Liam. She gently held his cold hand. In the silence, she leaned closer and whispered, "If only you could hear me. I hope, even just once, you could hear your child." She sighed. "I couldn't say it before, and I still don't know if I can now. But every day I see you with him, it makes me want to let go of all this fear." She ran her fingers through his hair. "I'm sorry for everything I never told you, for everything I kept hidden. I just wanted to protect you both, even if I did it the wrong way." For a brief moment she hugged him from the side tightly with all her emotion. Then she stood, adjusted the washcloth, and quietly left the lounge. As she walked back to the ward, her heart was heavy, but for the first time she heard herself clearly, not in fear, but in the quiet request of love. "If the time comes, I hope you're ready to listen." Back in the lounge, Theo remained asleep. He hadn't stirred, he hadn't heard a word, but in his dream, a woman's voice echoed over and over. "He's your son! He's your son!" And while his mind hadn't yet accepted it, his heart was already starting to believe. The next morning, Dr. Theo Carlson was back to normal. No fever, no sign of weakness. But instead of jumping back into his usual routine, he had something else in mind, an emotional experiment, not a medical one. "If you won't tell me the truth, Andy," he muttered to himself in front of the mirror, "maybe it's time to put you under the spotlight." In the ward, Andy was busy caring for Liam. She had fed him soup and given him vitamins early. But she noticed something. Theo hadn't visited that morning. "Baby, has Dr. Theo come by?" she asked. "No, Mom. He hasn't come since yesterday." Andy felt a pang of anxiety. She rushed to the lounge. Empty. She checked the outpatient department. Also empty. It wasn't until she reached the nurse's station that she got news. "Ma'am, Dr. Theo slipped in the parking lot earlier," a nurse said. "He has some abdominal pain. He's resting in the special room in the private wing." "What?" Andy asked, startled. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "He didn't want anyone to know, especially not the patients." Andy immediately ran to the private wing. Nurse Mark let her into room 112. Inside, Theo lay on the bed, an ice pack on his abdomen, pretending to be in pain. When he saw Andy, he groaned softly. "I thought you weren't coming." "What happened to you?" she demanded, rushing to his side. "It's nothing, just a little dizziness, probably stress." "Stress? Seriously, Theo, you should be resting at home." "I'm not used to you not being around," he said, closing his eyes dramatically. Andy grabbed his arm. "You're joking, but you look like you're really in pain." Theo winced, holding his stomach. "If I don't wake up tomorrow, can you do me a favor?" Andy frowned. "What are you saying?" "If something happens, I just want to hear one thing. Am I really Liam's father?" Time froze. Andy swallowed hard. She was close, so close, to telling the truth. "Why are you asking me that now?" she said. "I just have a feeling," Theo replied weakly. "I know you can't give me a clear answer, but maybe just once, let me hear it." Andy's tears began to fall. She knelt beside him, held his hand tightly. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Liam is your son. He's our son." Silence fell. Andy gasped for breath, her hand pressed to her chest. "Now that you know, please don't leave us." But Theo suddenly sat up. No pain, no limp. No more lies, he said with a grin. Acting works. What? Theo laughed. I'm fine. No injury. It was all an act. You tricked me? I had to. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have heard the truth until Liam's graduation. Andy's nostrils flared. Theo Carlson, you are unbelievable. But I got the truth, he said proudly, pointing at himself. I'm the father. You have no shame, she muttered, but before she could leave, Theo called out, Andy! She turned. I know you're angry, rightfully so, but thank you. For what? For telling me. Because starting now, I won't let Liam out of my life. No matter what happens, I'm his father, and I'm going to stand by that. Andy didn't answer, but her eyes, equal parts annoyed and relieved, told him everything. Theo rubbed his stomach again, pretending it still hurt. You can slap me if you want, but not too hard. I might really end up in the hospital. Andy stepped forward and slapped him across the face. Okay, maybe I deserved that, Theo said, wincing, but then she smiled. For the first time, there were no lies between them, just the truth, and the silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was peace. The night was quiet in room 112 of the hospital's private wing. The air from the old air conditioner was cold, but the tension between the two people inside was warm and sharp. Andy stood at the door, arms crossed. Theo sat on the hospital bed, rubbing the cheek she had just slapped. Ow, he muttered with a grin, still holding his face. What? Andy asked with a raised eyebrow. Want another one? I do, Theo teased, but only if it comes with a hug afterward. He pulled the blanket around himself, pretending to shiver in fear. Andy let out a dramatic sigh. You're unbelievable. I could have fainted from all that panic. But you didn't, Theo replied with a wink. And you were great. Your confession, clean and surgical, flawless incision, no bleeding. Andy rolled her eyes. Maybe next time I'll be the one operating on you. Theo laughed, but then the mood shifted to something gentler. They sat quietly for a moment, no longer weighed down by uncertainty. The silence now felt like a fresh breath after a storm. Andy eventually sat at the edge of the bed. You have no idea how many times I wanted to tell you, she said softly. But every time I looked at Liam, I was terrified of losing him, of losing everything. Theo looked at her with calm sincerity. You won't lose him. You won't lose me either. From now on, I want us to wake up beside him every day. Together. Andy turned to him. Us? Yes, Theo said, reaching for her hand. Not perfect, but whole. Andy didn't say anything. She slowly took his hand in hers, warm, steady, and for the first time, her tears fell, not from fear, but from relief. Can we still fix this? Theo asked, voice gentle. Even if I was absent for years? Andy nodded. You owe our son a lot. You never abandoned him, but you also never came for him. You'll have to make up for it. I will, Theo promised, with every hug, every bedtime, every bite of bitter vegetables, even if I hate them. Andy chuckled. Still hate bitter melon. From now on, I'll eat it, as long as it's with you two. Just then, the door creaked open. Liam peeked inside, holding his toy. Mum? Theo? You're taking so long. Theo and Andy exchanged a smile. Sorry, buddy, Theo said. We were just talking. Liam stepped inside. Okay, but don't take too long. I want you back in my bed. Theo bent down to carry him, but winced. Ow, I still have emotional trauma from your mom's slap. Liam's eyes widened. Mom slapped you? Oh, yes, Theo groaned, but it was worth it. Andy burst out laughing. You really are insane. The next morning, Liam was feeling stronger. As Andy gave him his medicine, he excitedly began to share a dream he had. Mom, I dreamed about us last night, he said. Really? What happened? We were all living together in a house with a big mango tree and a swing. Wow, Theo said. Who tied the swing? You did, and you pushed me while Mom was cooking outside. What was she cooking? Chicken soup. Theo turned to Andy. Uh-oh, he said you only make chicken soup when you're in love. Andy smiled and squeezed Liam's hand. That's right, baby. Moms cook more than just food. They cook love. Just then, a nurse entered the room. Doc, ma'am, someone at the front desk said a TV reporter wants to feature Liam's story. It's for a Healing Success series. They want to highlight him as a charity patient who made it. The three exchanged glances. What if all three of us appear on TV? Theo asked with a grin. A twist, the doctor, the mother, and the miracle child. Andy blushed. No way, I don't want to be on camera. What if that's where I propose? Theo teased, smiling wider. Huh? Andy gasped. I want the world to know Liam is our son. Liam clapped. Yes, let's announce it on TV. I'm your son. They all laughed as the golden afternoon light filtered through the windows. In the charity ward, surrounded by patience and struggle, a little family was being formed, not through wealth, but through truth, and for the first time, laughter replaced the tears. The afternoon heat hung over the charity ward at St. Grace Hospital, but the chatter was even hotter. Everyone was talking about Liam, how he had recovered so well and would soon be recommended for discharge. Almost every nurse, doctor, and even the patients had come to think of Liam as part of their little family. Today, Dr. Theo Carlson had something else in mind, something that had been circling in his thoughts for days. While Andy packed up Liam's things, Theo arrived holding a cake box and a small backpack. Doc? Andy asked. What's this? Surprise, Theo grinned, placing the box on the table. I know it's not Liam's birthday yet, but I wanted us to have a special day. What's the occasion? Andy asked, blushing despite herself. Before she could finish, Liam rushed over. Wow, is that cake for me? Yes, Theo said, but before you open it, I have a question. The room stilled. Andy and Theo exchanged glances. Liam, Theo began, kneeling before the boy, I just want to ask, would it be okay if I became your real dad? Like, truly your dad? The kind that wakes up with you every morning? Liam went silent. He looked from Theo to his mum, then back again. Can you be Mum's husband too? The entire ward burst into laughter. Andy's eyes widened. Baby, what are you saying? But Theo didn't hesitate. From the backpack, he pulled out a small jewelry box. Inside was a simple gold ring, engraved with a tiny message. For our mornings as three. He turned to Andy, and with patience and staff whispering all around, he knelt. Andy Matthews, for years you kept me away, and maybe back then I wasn't ready to face everything, but now I'm ready, for your anger, your stress, even your stew that's always missing potatoes, as long as I'm with you. Andy held back tears. After all the years, after everything we went through, we were pulled apart, hidden, scattered, Theo said. But now, I want us to be whole. As Liam's parents, as friends, as husband and wife, Liam wrinkled his forehead. Husband and wife? Yes, Theo said, eyes gleaming. Andy, marry me. Andy turned to Liam, who was watching like a cartoon he didn't want to end. Please, Mom, Liam said. Didn't I say my dream is for us to be complete? She's got icing on her cheek, Andy muttered, laughing and crying at the same time. Theo wiped his face and stood. So, what's your answer? Andy stepped forward and hugged him tightly. Yes, Theo, we're whole now. Liam jumped into their arms. Yay, I have a dad! The room erupted with cheers. Patients clapped. Nurse Mark filmed with his phone. "I told you this was going to be a love story," he shouted. "This one's going viral." "Who cares?" One nurse laughed. "They're in the middle of a charity ward, but it feels like the best place on earth." Because here, after all the separation and pain, they had found each other again. And more importantly, they were whole in front of the boy who brought them back together. Outside the hospital, as the sun dipped low, the three of them sat on a bench eating cake. "Who gets the first bite?" Theo asked. "Mum does," Liam shouted. "Why me?" "Because you're the new queen of our family." "And who's the king?" Theo teased. "You are," Liam declared. "And who's the prince?" "Me, of course." They all laughed. They had no fancy things. They were still in the charity ward, but in their hearts they had something far more precious than any riches. They had each other. A week had passed since Dr. Theo Carlson proposed in the charity ward of St. Grace Hospital. For some, it had been a simple moment, just a man of strong resolve, and a quiet mother bound by love. But for Theo, Andy, and most of all, Liam, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, a life without secrets, without fear, a life as a family. The sun was high outside the hospital as members of the media began gathering outside the OR wing. A documentary crew had invited Theo for a feature on pediatric success stories, particularly focusing on Liam, the miracle child who recovered in a public hospital. But the crew didn't know there was another surprise coming. Inside the operating room, nurses buzzed around, not preparing for surgery, but decorating. The table was clean, lined with flowers and carefully placed props. No patient lay there. Instead, it would soon serve as the stage for something more heartfelt. "Are we ready?" Nurse Mark called out, checking camera angles. "All good," someone replied. Theo stood nearby, still in his surgical scrubs, but hiding a piece of cake in his pocket. "Where are my 2 stars?" he muttered. Just then, the door opened. "Present!" Liam shouted, wearing a mini scrub suit with a name tag that read, "Junior Doctor." Behind him was Andy, wearing a simple white dress, holding a small clipboard like a real nurse. Theo whistled. "Wow, you both look like you're ready for a real shift." "What are we doing, Dad?" Liam asked excitedly. "We're about to operate, son," Theo said, kneeling beside him. "Not on a heart, but on our future." Facing the camera, Theo began to speak. "Many doctors are trained to wield scalpels. We're taught how to remove tumors, stitch wounds, and save lives. But there's one thing med school doesn't teach us: how to build a family." He turned to Andy and Liam. "I'm not just a doctor, I'm a father, and in all the diagnoses I've ever made, this is the most important one. Love needs to be treated, protected, and fought for." Tears ran down Andy's face as she held Liam's hand. Suddenly, a nurse wheeled in a surgical tray, but instead of scalpels and clamps, it held 2 wedding rings. Liam burst into laughter. "Are you serious, Dad? You're getting married in the OR?" "Of course," Theo said. "This is where we became a family. It's only right we take our vows here too." Andy looked around. No church, no fancy resort, no ballroom. But this, to her, was the most sacred altar imaginable. This was where pain, healing, reunion, and now commitment had all come together. Theo picked up a ring and stepped toward her. "Andy Matthews," he said gently, hands trembling. "From a patient to a secret, to the mother of my son, I want to make you a legal part of my life. Not out of duty, but because I love you." Andy said nothing. She only cried and nodded, slipping the ring onto his finger. Then it was her turn. She picked up the other ring. "Theo," she whispered, "I didn't ask for you, but you were given to me. I won't ask for a perfect life. All I ask is that it's with you. Every day." Nurse Mark officiated with a short prayer, and the OR team erupted in applause. Behind the glass, staff watched with smiles. Liam was the first to yell, "Yay! They're married! We're really a family now!" He ran into their arms, and in the middle of the OR, the three embraced. No spotlight needed, no grand audience required. The true miracle wasn't just Liam's recovery, it was the reunion of a family that had once been torn apart. 3 months after the wedding, life at St. Grace Hospital had returned to normal, except for one new addition to the routine. Liam now arrived every day in his mini doctor's suit, sitting by the waiting area like he belonged. "Ready for surgery, Dr. Liam?" Theo joked as the boy wiped his hands with alcohol. "Yes, Dad, but I want to do it with you every time." Theo smiled. "Promise, I'll never leave you, on or off the operating table." Andy approached, carrying a lunchbox filled with adobo and rice. "Lunchtime, doctors," she said brightly, and in that ordinary moment of food, laughter, and a new day, the three of them quietly celebrated the truth. This wasn't the life they had planned, but it was the beginning of the strongest kind of family. The end.